Megkérnék mindenkit arra, hogy lájkoljátok, illetve osszátok meg tartalmainkat, melyeket megtalálhattok Infobubble, illetve Yahoo útja néven TikTokon, Instagramon, YouTube-on, Facebookon, valamint weboldalainkon, és ha hasznosnak, értékesnek találjátok munkánkat, akkor támogassátok, azt köszönöm azoknak, akik ezt megtették eddig.
If history is any guide, the probability of several, if not many countries in the Western world devolving into dictatorships by mid-century, if not sooner, is extremely high. Civilizations are fragile. With rising unemployment caused by automation and AI, economic instability via globalism and debased fiat currencies, as well as unsustainable debt, and this isn't even to mention 2 years of mandates. And hey, why not throw in climate change in there as a perhaps? Shortages of drinking water in many parts of the world and never-ending culturally transformative migration will most likely implode much of the Western world in the very near future. And in the chaos and total lack of social cohesion that we are importing, there will inevitably be calls for order and assurances of renewed stability. But with those calls, there will be a cost. History has been recorded for thousands of years, and thus surely we must be able to glean something from it. Or so is the assertion of Sir John Glubb, as delineated upon in his book, The Fate of Empires and the Search for Survival. To summarize his thesis, humans do not learn from history because their study of it is superficial and or prejudiced. His study, in particular, led him to the conclusion that 250 years or thereabouts, or about 10 generations, was the average length of national greatness, and that this average has not varied in over 3,000 years. He also arranged the stages of the rise and fall of great nations as the following. Empires begin when a small group of people violently burst upon the world scene. This pattern, which Glubb sees as being aided by poverty and lack of traditions, has been replicated from Alexander to Muhammad, from the Mongols to the British. This outburst period is marked by the spreading of new customs and habits, think tea time, as well as new ways of thinking. During the outburst period, there is immense displays of courage and great energy. For example, Alexander was able to topple the Persian Empire with only 40,000 men. The Arabs themselves took Spain with only 12,000 men. From there, the success of empire leads to an age of commerce. What follows is a replacement of pursuit of glory and conquest with the adventure of pursuing money. This is a time when education is about producing mandarins that are all about maintaining the status quo. It's at this time when the empire, while sapped of its overall strength, still wields enough to keep its vassals in check. Intellectualism, also in and of itself, does not help empire, as people become increasingly lost in elaborate and hypothetical arguments, and educated debate is not what empires depend on. Empires depend upon decisive action. And this is the high point of empire. And it is followed by the age of decadence, which is marked by defensiveness, pessimism, materialism, frivolity, an influx of foreigners, the welfare state, and a weakening of religion. Glubb identifies the causes of decadence to be the result of too long a period of wealth and power, selfishness, love of money, and the loss of a sense of duty. Now, listen to how Glubb detailed the age of decadence and compare and contrast this with our current paradigm as it's being enacted in the Western world. He maintained that material wealth breeds defensive positions as people have something to lose and are wary of risking too much. And it is at this time that duty is abandoned, selfishness is rife, because people forget their predatory past, or, as is the current scheme in the Western world, made to feel ashamed of it. It's in the decline via decadence that vast numbers of foreigners arrive. Now, Glubb, who spent the better part of his life in the Middle East, was clear that the foreigners arriving are not inferior, but they are different from the original people who built the society, and thus constitute a weakness to nation in 4 ways. They are different in culture and nature to the original people. They form their own communities that seek to protect their own interests rather than the nation as a whole. The new people arrive at the tail end of empire and arrive at a period of national strength, but when empire falters, they resurrect old grievances. Most importantly, they are loyal only in times of stability. As a nation becomes ever more atomized, it becomes ever more fractious, and groups place their own political interests above those of empire. And as domestication via the political process increases within institutions, so political hostility between groups spills out onto the streets. Does any of this sound familiar? The heroes of a declining society are the likes of singers, actors, and athletes, not statesmen, academics, or philosophers. The Romans, for their part, demanded free meals and games, or bread and circuses. Again, think to our own times and the cries for an ever-expanded state that provides for its citizens, as well as people's obsession with sport. Soccer or football matches and their outcomes are elevated to the level of national crisis, when they are in fact grown men that have nothing to do with the local communities they represent, kicking around a ball to the howls of other men, and doing it for millions of dollars. And all the while, sports ball, as well as the players, have been elevated to a national obsession. It's also important to understand that 7 empires have disappeared in the last 100 years. And the collapse of empire or strong state is something that is basically predetermined from its birth. As monopolies do not last, so too for empires. The 4 major empires that have collapsed in the last 100 years are the Ottoman, Austro-Hungarian, the French, and the British, and the 2 shorter than average, the Japanese and Soviet, as well as the false start of the German. While the Japanese and fledgling German empires were extinguished by war, it was the Soviet Empire, which is a very unique and historically odd example, which lasted very much shorter than the average imperial lifespan and imploded upon itself, and was most likely due to the fact that the Soviet Union was predicated upon very unnatural institutions that were based in rigid ideology with no inbuilt flexibility. It was an empire most were not happy to reside in or proud to be a part of. So again, this was an example of empire that lasted almost 80 years, very much shorter than the average imperial lifespan, and again, possibly this was the result of the Soviet Union being such an unnatural institution. So then, when we look upon our Tinder hookup, sports ball obsessed, cowardly submissive, politically correct, emotive-driven, decadent society, and at the same time being told we must constantly apologize for the success of those same societies, that incidentally hundreds of millions globally clamor to find their way into, and then continually make demands on the original group that created everything, does any of what Glubb outlines in his book with regards to other empires sound that far-fetched. Also, when looking at Europe in particular, the prognosis of the European Union, which is in the midst of a particularly bizarre experiment, is grave. The EU is attempting to achieve empire via economic unity, but will never be able to do so as they are ancient rival states rather than vassals held together via the yoke of empire, while all at the same time adding a belligerent and hostile fifth column with complete abandon. Thus, as increasing economic instability as well as the social tensions that exist between groups that are being forced to share the same space, well, the fractious nature of our current society will at some point in the near future no longer be able to be held in check via bread and circuses. The center will not hold, and a political vacuum will be created. And as many of you understand, nature abhors a vacuum. If current conditions are not addressed by the political leadership and censorship of the kind that we have seen over the past several years, but in particular over 2020 and 2021, as well as going into 2022, and this is the only response to legitimate grievances that people have, and the majority continues to cower in silence, the end of our period of decadence and decline looks to be the same as all great civilizations that came before us, as we seem incapable of learning from our past. However, there are silver linings. Our society now has the ability to distribute information and organize in ways that no other people have ever before in all of history. And either way, the time is now. We dance with frivolity at our own great peril. The cancer that is spread throughout every part of our civilization will be terminal, if not treated. We need offensive positions and lose our fear of speaking out against the currently insane state of enforced paradigms. The coming troubles just upon the horizon that have been brought upon by decadence, well, we will inevitably hear calls for order and assurances of renewed stability. But as always, as I indicated at the start of this presentation, as always, there will be a price. And yes, perhaps we have reached the place as Republican Rome did, where the experiment in suffrage has run its course. Adjustments will of course have to be made along the way, as well as new ways of problem solving. It is either this or the alternative. And that alternative will be the desire for a cheap iPhone and the fear of being called illiberal in the face of moral decline and decadence, and will, unless we reignite our societies, be the epitaph etched upon our civilization's tombstone. Sorry for the number of black pills, however, sometimes it is necessary to hold up a mirror to something nobody wants to see and nobody wants to speak of. But I think we can do this. Thanks for watching, and if you like this commentary, please subscribe, but more importantly, check to see that you are still subscribed. If you'd like to help this channel, your contributions and support are very much appreciated. Ways to do so are in the description below. Again, thanks, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Amennyiben adótok 1%-ával támogatnátok munkánkat, megtehetitek a Yahuwah útja egyesületen keresztül, ehhez minden adatot megtaláltok az Infobubble, illetve Yahuwah útja összes felületén az interneten, valamint ennek a videónak az információs sávjában, és köszönjük azoknak, akik ezt megtették eddig.